So, this happened a couple of weeks ago, and it's taken me this long to even feel comfortable enough to share it. It all started with a simple text message, which, as you'll see, spiraled into one of the most embarrassing, confusing, and downright mortifying experiences of my life. I'm in my late 20s and still figuring out the whole adulting thing. I have a job I mostly enjoy, friends I see every once in a while, and a solid relationship with my family. But there's one thing I'm notoriously bad at: keeping track of my phone. Like, I'll leave it on the kitchen counter, on my desk, in the bathroom, anywhere. I've lost it so many times that my mom jokes about installing a tracker in it. That being said, it's not unusual for me to have moments of sheer panic when I realize I've misplaced it. But this time? This time, the phone wasn't lost, just the trust of my entire social circle. It started with a normal Tuesday morning. I was at work, sipping my coffee, replying to emails, and generally going about my business. Around 11 a.m., I received a text message from an unknown number. It wasn't something I thought much about at first. I get random messages sometimes, either from companies or people trying to sell me stuff. But then, I read it. Hey, it's Mike. I know we haven't talked in a while, but I was hoping we could pick up where we left off. Now, this wouldn't be so weird if I didn't have a bit of a complicated history with a guy named Mike. He was an ex, and I hadn't heard from him in years. Like, we broke up during my first year of college and didn't stay in touch at all afterward. To say I was confused would be an understatement. I quickly glanced at the message again and then checked the number. I didn't recognize it, but then again, people change their numbers all the time, right? Maybe he got a new phone. Still, the whole thing felt off. I tried to ignore it at first. Maybe it was some random guy playing a prank or someone who had accidentally gotten the wrong number. But curiosity got the better of me, and I replied, half-jokingly, Mike? The Mike? The Mike I haven't spoken to since, well, a very long time ago? I hit send, not really expecting a response. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed again. Yeah, it's me. Sorry, I should have explained. I didn't know how to get in touch with you, but I've been thinking about you a lot lately. Do you think we could meet up sometime? Maybe get some coffee? Now, by this point, I was starting to get that weird feeling in the pit of my stomach, the feeling that comes when you realize you might be about to make a huge mistake. But I also couldn't help but feel a little flattered, even though the whole situation was making me uncomfortable. I mean, we'd been together for a year, and it hadn't ended badly at all. In fact, we were on good terms when we parted ways. So, I replied, okay, sure. We can grab coffee. I guess I'm curious what prompted you to reach out after all this time. Then, the conversation took an unexpected turn. Mike sent another message almost immediately. I just wanted to apologize for how things ended, you know? I was kind of a jerk when we broke up, and I want to make things right. It's been eating at me for years. This was where things started to get really weird. I didn't remember him being a jerk, at least not in the sense that he had hurt me in any major way. Our breakup was mutual, and while we had some awkward moments after, there was never any animosity. But, maybe he had been carrying some guilt or regret. I wasn't sure what to think. So, I responded, I don't think you were a jerk, Mike. I mean, it wasn't the easiest thing, but I don't hold anything against you. A few more texts came in, and we talked about the old days, how things had changed, and what we'd both been up to since. But then, as the conversation progressed, it became clear that Mike's intentions weren't purely about catching up. The next message made me stop mid-sentence, so. I've been kind of thinking, and I know this is probably crazy, but would you be open to getting back together? I know we haven't talked in a while, but I really miss you, and I've made some big changes in my life. I think we could work now. And this is where I completely screwed up. I wasn't sure how to respond. On the one hand, I had moved on, and I wasn't looking to reignite an old flame. But on the other hand, it felt kind of flattering to have someone think that highly of me again. Plus, the guy sounded sincere. After a lot of back and forth in my mind, I gave a half-hearted response, "I'm not sure, Mike. I think it's been a long time, and we've both changed a lot. I don't want to go backwards." I felt pretty good about that answer. It was polite, respectful, and firm without being mean. But then, things got even weirder. Mike's response was, "Well, not what I expected at all." "Yeah, I get it. No worries. But hey, you know what? I'm glad we're talking again. I miss you." I sat there for a moment, staring at the screen, trying to figure out if I was actually being played or if I was overthinking the whole thing. I didn't respond, and after a few minutes, he texted again. Only this time, it wasn't just a text, it was a picture. Now, here's where things get confusing. The picture he sent was a selfie. It was a selfie of him holding a big bouquet of flowers, with a sign that said, "I'm sorry, I miss you." Now, if this wasn't bad enough, the real kicker was the background of the photo. He was standing in front of a familiar coffee shop, the one we used to go to when we were dating. My heart sank, and that's when the dread started creeping in. How could he have known I frequented that place? We had never talked about it. It hit me like a ton of bricks. I double-checked the number. This was definitely Mike's number. But then, I realized something. Mike's number was saved in my contacts as Mike from a few years ago. But this number was different. It wasn't his. I felt my stomach drop. I had been talking to a total stranger this entire time. Someone had clearly found my ex's name and impersonated him to get into my life. I panicked. I immediately texted back, "Who is this? This isn't funny. Stop pretending to be Mike." A few seconds later, I got a message back, "Relax, it's just me. I thought you'd be flattered." I still have no idea who that person was. But after blocking the number and frantically checking my social media for signs of anyone else messing with me, I felt completely humiliated. It turns out that, after a quick Google search, the number was associated with a random scammer from a completely different state. I don't think I'll ever be able to look at a text message the same way again. It's been weeks, and I still can't get over how dumb I was to even entertain that conversation. So, to the random scammer who decided to impersonate my ex and get a chuckle out of it, I hope you're proud of yourself. Lesson learned: don't ever trust a number you don't recognize, no matter how good the conversation seems. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments, I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. TIFU by accidentally getting my best friend's fiancé kicked out of their wedding. I never imagined I'd be in a situation like this. It's the kind of thing you read about and think, wow, that person really messed up. Well, I guess I'm that person now. Let me take you back a few weeks ago to the start of this nightmare. It all began when my best friend, Sarah, announced she was getting married. Naturally, I was ecstatic. We've been close since we were kids, and I've watched her grow up, fall in love, and now, preparing to marry the man of her dreams, Derek. I knew from the moment they started dating that they were meant for each other, so when the proposal happened, I was thrilled. I was also, of course, asked to be the maid of honor, which I took very seriously. I've known Derek for just as long as Sarah, and while we weren't the closest, I always liked him. He was charming, thoughtful, and very much in love with Sarah. Their relationship was one of those rare ones where you just knew it was built to last. The wedding was set for a beautiful venue on a hilltop overlooking the ocean, a dream come true for Sarah. Everything seemed perfect, and I was more than happy to play my part in making her special day flawless. The first major issue arose during the rehearsal dinner. We were all gathered around a large table, eating and laughing, and everything was going great. Derek's cousin, James, had been telling stories from their childhood, and we were all in stitches. James was a bit of a troublemaker back in the day, but in the most endearing way possible, or so I thought. We'd all gotten along well throughout the evening. It was a relaxed, fun atmosphere, and it seemed like the beginning of a smooth wedding weekend. Then came the speech. James stood up, glass in hand, and began what I thought was going to be a light-hearted toast. He started by recounting embarrassing stories about Derek and Sarah, poking fun at their relationship in a way that was cute at first. But then, out of nowhere, James dropped a bombshell. He mentioned a time, back when Sarah and Derek were dating, that Sarah had, apparently, broken up with Derek for a brief period. According to James, it was because Sarah had found someone else but had quickly realized her mistake and came crawling back. He laughed it off, saying it was a part of their story and that Derek was a saint for taking her back. The room went dead silent. Now, I'm not sure if it was the shock of hearing such a personal story or just the awkward tension in the air, but Sarah went pale. She looked like she'd been slapped in the face. Her smile faded instantly, and I could see the hurt in her eyes. Derek's face also turned white, but in a much more subtle, controlled way. The rest of the guests were looking around, unsure of how to react. James seemed to sense the mood shift and tried to laugh it off, but it was clear that what he had just said had struck a nerve. Sarah stood up abruptly, excused herself from the table, and walked out of the room without saying a word. The rest of us just sat there, stunned. I immediately followed her outside, hoping I could comfort her and get her to calm down. When I found her, she was sitting on a bench, her head in her hands. "Sarah?" I said softly. She looked up at me, and I saw tears in her eyes. "I can't believe he said that. How could he say that in front of everyone?" I had no idea what to say. I mean, I knew about the breakup, but it wasn't something I expected anyone to bring up, especially not at the rehearsal dinner. I tried to comfort her, but she just shook her head. "I don't know if I can go through with this, not after what James said. He humiliated me in front of everyone." I could tell she was on the edge, but I didn't want to make things worse by saying the wrong thing. So, I suggested she take a break and that we would all talk about it tomorrow. The next day, Sarah was still distant. She seemed distracted, and the air around the wedding preparations felt tense. I did everything I could to try to keep things on track, making sure everything was in place, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Then came the wedding itself. The ceremony was beautiful, perfect, even. Sarah looked stunning in her dress, Derek was teary-eyed as he watched her walk down the aisle, and everything seemed to be falling into place again. I thought we had made it past the awkwardness of the rehearsal dinner and everything would be fine. Until the reception. James, who had been somewhat subdued up until this point, grabbed the microphone during the speeches. I thought maybe he had learned his lesson from the night before. But then, with a grin plastered on his face, he made an announcement that no one saw coming. "I just wanted to say something to Derek and Sarah," he said, clearly a little tipsy. "You guys have been through a lot, and I'm really happy to see you're getting married, but I think I should tell the story of the other guy Sarah was seeing before she came back to Derek." My heart sank. Sarah's face turned an even deeper shade of red. Derek stiffened, but I could see his jaw clenching as he tried to maintain his composure. I knew then that things were about to go south. "James," Derek called out, his voice tight, "don't." But James was too far gone to listen. He launched into a story about Sarah's brief fling with someone else during their breakup, the very story that Sarah had hoped no one would know, let alone talk about at the wedding. I was sitting at the table, frozen, too horrified to do anything. That's when it happened. Sarah, in a burst of emotion, stood up and stormed out of the room, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. Derek followed after her, his face a mask of anger and confusion. The guests were left in stunned silence, unsure of how to react. I stood there, frozen, my mind racing. I wanted to go after Sarah, to apologize to Derek, but I couldn't bring myself to move. A few hours later, the wedding was officially over, but the damage had been done. Sarah and Derek didn't speak for days. When they finally did, it wasn't as simple as just brushing off what had happened. They argued, and as it turns out, the whole other guy thing had been a deeper issue than anyone realized. It wasn't just a passing fling, it was a moment where Sarah had questioned everything, and James had exposed a wound that had never fully healed. In the end, Sarah and Derek called off the wedding. The entire thing fell apart, and I felt like the worst person alive. I should have done something. I should have stopped James before he had the chance to ruin everything. But I didn't. So here I am, sitting here, reflecting on how one poorly timed speech and one stupid comment ruined everything. I never thought I'd be the one to accidentally destroy my best friend's wedding. So, this all started a few months ago. I was working in a mid-sized marketing firm, and one of the perks of the job was that we got a chance to interact with clients directly, which meant a decent amount of responsibility, but also the opportunity to prove ourselves. I had been there for about a year, and for the most part, things were going smoothly. My direct supervisor, let's call her Karen, a fairly common name, but trust me, it fits, was a bit of a control freak. She micromanaged everything. At first, I thought it was just because she wanted to make sure everything was done perfectly, but over time, I started to realize it was more about her insecurities than anything else. Karen and I had a good professional relationship, but there were moments where she would get unnecessarily critical or difficult to work with. I was pretty used to it, so I'd mostly bite my tongue. The whole team would joke behind her back about how she was a closet tyrant, and we all tried our best to work around her quirks. That's not to say I was perfect. I'll admit that sometimes I would take shortcuts in my work, small things that I knew Karen wouldn't notice unless she really drilled down into the details. The thing is, she never really seemed to care about the little stuff. It was always the bigger projects where she would tighten the screws. So, I thought I had a pretty good balance of pushing the limits without crossing too far. Then came the big project, the one that would change everything. We landed a huge new client, a real big fish, and Karen was given the lead role in handling their marketing strategy. It was a high-stakes deal, and she was under a lot of pressure. Karen was doing everything she could to ensure that everything went off without a hitch, and to her credit, she did manage to get the client on board. But this was where things started to go sideways. About a week after the initial contract was signed, Karen asked me to prepare a comprehensive analysis of their current marketing strategies, including their digital footprint and how we could position them in the market. Easy enough, right? I've done a million of these reports, and I knew this client inside out already. I spent hours gathering data, doing research, and writing up a report that was thorough and professional. I'm talking about pulling all-nighters and making sure everything was flawless, like an absolute textbook perfect report. I sent it over to Karen the night before the big presentation, expecting her to review it and maybe make a few adjustments. But Karen didn't respond until the morning of the presentation. She called me at 8 a.m., sounding frantic. "Where's the report?" "The one for the client meeting?" "I don't have it yet," she said. I was confused. I checked my email, and sure enough, I had sent it over to her the night before. I pulled up my inbox, found the email, and forwarded it again to her just in case. "Check again." "I sent it last night," I said. She looked at the email chain. It's not in my inbox, but there's this weird email with your name on it." "Is this the report?" I felt a pit in my stomach. What the hell was she talking about? I knew I hadn't sent anything weird. I walked into the office in a hurry, and when I saw Karen's screen, I froze. Somehow, in my exhaustion, I had accidentally sent the wrong version of the report. What I had sent her wasn't the polished, professional one I'd spent hours perfecting. It was a draft I had written a week earlier, a draft that wasn't even close to being finished. It was filled with placeholders, rough notes, and even a couple of obvious typos. I could feel my heart rate spike as I realized I had made a huge mistake. At that moment, I did what any sensible person would do when they've royally messed up. I panicked. I didn't want to admit my mistake, so I tried to cover it up. I must have sent the wrong file, I said, trying to sound calm, though I was on the verge of breaking into a sweat. Just send them the correct version from the email I sent last night. But Karen wasn't buying it. She was too busy freaking out to notice my obvious discomfort. She started typing up an apology email to the client while I just stood there, paralyzed, trying to come up with a way to salvage the situation. Here's where things got complicated. Karen decided, without consulting me, to go ahead and present the draft to the client, assuming that they wouldn't notice the glaring issues. I couldn't believe it. She presented the unfinished, embarrassing report to the client in front of their entire team. This was the big presentation we had all been waiting for, and Karen had completely botched it. By the time she finished, the client was dead silent. Karen, apparently oblivious to the disaster she had just unleashed, kept talking about next steps. Meanwhile, I felt like I was going to throw up from the embarrassment. I wanted to pull her aside and explain, but it was too late. The damage was already done. Later that day, Karen called me into her office. She was furious. Not at herself, but at me. "I can't believe you let this happen," she said, seething. "Do you have any idea how much damage this could do to our reputation?" I tried to explain, but she wouldn't hear it. She was so upset that she practically screamed at me. I'm talking full-on yelling, red-faced, the works. At that point, I realized that not only was my career in jeopardy, but so was Karen's. She had made a massive blunder, and in her mind, I was the one who had ruined everything. As the day wore on, things only got worse. Word of Karen's meltdown spread quickly through the office. Some of our colleagues started whispering behind her back, calling her unfit and unprofessional. The boss started getting wind of what happened, and as you can imagine, he wasn't too happy about it. The client was angry, and we could already feel the tension in the office. Then, 2 days later, Karen was called into the boss's office. I had no idea what happened in that meeting, but when she came out, she was visibly shaken. She didn't say anything to me directly, but a few hours later, I overheard her on the phone, crying and talking about how she was going to be let go because of the mess. I was still in shock, trying to process everything. But here's the kicker, Karen didn't get fired. The blame was shifted onto me. Somehow, in the wake of her meltdown, she convinced the higher-ups that it was my fault. My mistake with the report had caused the whole fiasco. It was like the perfect storm of incompetence and blame shifting. To make a long story short, Karen stayed on, but I almost lost my job. The higher-ups gave me a stern warning and told me that if anything like this ever happened again, I'd be out. So, here I am now, barely hanging on to my job, knowing full well that Karen is still in charge of the department, and she's the one who made the mistake. But she's too good at playing the political game, and I've learned the hard way that sometimes, the ones who screw up the most are the ones who make it out unscathed. Moral of the story? Don't panic when you mess up. Own it, fix it, and never, ever try to cover it up. Otherwise, you might end up as the fall guy for someone else's incompetence. And if you're ever in a position to send a report to your boss, double-check that damn attachment first. It was supposed to be a normal Friday evening, one of those rare nights where I didn't have anything to do and could finally enjoy a quiet night in my apartment. I'd spent the entire week working hard at my new job in a small tech startup, and with everything finally winding down, I was looking forward to some well-deserved relaxation. Maybe I would order some pizza, binge-watch a few episodes of the latest crime drama, and fall asleep early. It sounded perfect, almost too perfect. But, as we all know, things never go as planned. The evening began innocently enough. I got home around 6 p.m., tossed my jacket onto the couch, and went straight to the kitchen to prepare my dinner. I didn't even bother making anything elaborate, just a frozen lasagna I had lying around for emergencies. It was the kind of food that had zero nutritional value but was easy to heat up and satisfying enough to kill the hunger. While I was waiting for it to cook, I decided to scroll through my phone to kill time. My friends and I had a group chat going where we would send memes, updates on our lives, and the occasional deep conversation about our shared love of movies. As I opened the chat, I saw a message from my friend Andy. "Hey, guys, I've got some extra tickets to a new VR arcade that opened downtown. Anyone want to join me?" Now, I'm not a huge fan of VR, mainly because I get motion sickness whenever I try anything in that realm, but I knew Andy had been talking about this new place for weeks. The reviews had been all over social media, and it seemed like the kind of experience that everyone was raving about. Plus, I hadn't hung out with Andy in a while, so I figured I might as well go and catch up with him. I replied, "Sure, why not? I'll come along." We agreed on meeting in an hour. I finished heating up my lasagna, scarfed it down quickly, and started getting ready to head out. I wasn't exactly thrilled about the idea of spending my evening in a VR arcade, but it was a good excuse to get out of the apartment and see some friends, so I convinced myself that it would be fun. At this point, I was still half excited and half dreading the whole thing. I've always considered myself somewhat of a casual gamer, but my idea of a good time is usually something more traditional, like playing board games or video games that don't make me feel like I'm on a roller coaster. I arrived at the arcade around 8 p.m., and Andy was already waiting for me in the lobby. He greeted me with a big smile and handed me a ticket for the VR experience. We walked in, and I immediately felt like I was stepping into a futuristic spaceship. The lights were neon, and the entire atmosphere was designed to look like some kind of virtual reality utopia. The walls were lined with different VR setups, and there were people everywhere, each with headsets on and controllers in their hands, looking like they were all on some strange, immersive adventure. After a brief introduction from the staff, we were assigned our own VR stations. They handed me a headset and some gloves, and explained how everything worked. Despite my reservations, I was starting to feel a bit more excited. They had a variety of different virtual experiences to try, from action-packed adventures to more relaxing simulations. I figured I'd start slow with a calmer, less intense experience and go from there. I decided to try something that seemed relatively mild, a virtual nature walk. The description made it sound like a peaceful journey through a forest, with beautiful landscapes and soothing sounds. I thought this would be a safe bet to avoid the motion sickness that often comes with VR. As I put on the headset, everything around me turned black for a moment before the virtual world came into focus. I was standing in a dense forest, surrounded by towering trees and the sound of chirping birds. The air smelled fresh, and I could even feel a slight breeze against my virtual face. It was peaceful, almost calming, and for a brief moment, I forgot that I was in an arcade at all. It felt real. I took a few steps forward and started exploring. The forest path was winding, and I felt like I was truly walking through it. I bent down to admire a patch of virtual flowers, their vibrant colors and delicate petals almost too real to be fake. This was amazing. Maybe VR wasn't so bad after all. That's when everything went wrong. I don't know if it was because of my lack of experience with VR or the fact that I was starting to get a little too immersed in the world, but my brain suddenly decided to flip a switch. It wasn't that the simulation became too intense or jarring, it was more like the immersion started to go a little too deep. The virtual world around me began to feel too real. The gentle breeze felt almost tangible, and the sounds of the birds chirping grew louder, almost overwhelming. Without warning, I stumbled on a virtual rock and fell forward. Naturally, I tried to catch myself, but in doing so, I ended up stepping on the actual floor of the arcade. I lost my balance entirely and fell straight into one of the other VR stations next to me, which caused the person standing there to get knocked into their own setup. At this point, the situation quickly escalated. The guy I knocked over was wearing a much more intense VR experience, something with zombies. He immediately jumped up, startled, and screamed at the top of his lungs, thinking he was still in the virtual world. He swung his controller around, hitting me in the stomach. I gasped and stumbled back, still trying to figure out what was happening. His VR headset was now askew, and he looked like he had just seen a ghost. "Hey, sorry. I didn't mean to," I began, but before I could finish, a staff member rushed over to us. "Everything okay over here?" she asked, clearly alarmed by the commotion. The guy, still in a daze, looked at her and said, "I thought I was being attacked by zombies." "What just happened?" I could feel my face turning bright red with embarrassment. Here I was, knocking people over in a VR arcade because I couldn't handle the most basic of experiences. I sheepishly apologized to him and the staff member, but the damage had already been done. The staff member gave me a disapproving look, but thankfully, she didn't kick me out. The rest of the evening was a blur. I spent the next 20 minutes trying to get my bearings and not make things worse, but it felt like everyone in the arcade was watching me. I could hear whispers about the guy who couldn't even walk through a peaceful forest in VR without causing chaos. When I finally made it out of the VR area, I saw Andy waiting for me, looking somewhat concerned. He asked how it went, and I tried to play it off like I was just tired and ready to go home. He laughed and said, "Yeah, I saw you knock that guy over." Classic. I left the arcade feeling like I had just made a fool of myself. But it didn't end there. The next day, my friends started sending me screenshots of a post on the arcade's social media page. Apparently, they had captured the moment I fell and sent it out as part of their promotional material, calling it a real-life adventure gone wrong. The post quickly went viral. So yeah, that's how I became the face of an arcade's social media campaign, all because I couldn't walk through a virtual forest without causing a disaster. TIFU. It all started about 6 months ago, when I decided I wanted to make some extra money on the side. My full-time job as a tech support specialist was steady but not particularly lucrative, and I felt like I could do more with my skills. I had always been interested in the world of online reselling, so I figured it was time to dive into flipping used items. I've seen plenty of people make a decent living off of it, so why not give it a try? I started small, buying and reselling old video games, tech gadgets, and collectibles I could find in local thrift stores, garage sales, and online marketplaces. At first, it was a bit slow. I didn't know exactly what I was doing, but I was learning quickly. Every weekend, I'd hunt for items that I could buy for cheap and flip for profit. It was exciting, finding treasure hidden in the clutter of someone else's life. One day, I was browsing a local auction site when I came across an item that caught my eye, an old, dusty briefcase. It wasn't anything particularly fancy, but something about it seemed intriguing. The description was vague: vintage briefcase, good condition, unknown contents. That was it. The starting bid was just $10. I figured it couldn't hurt to try bidding. If I lost, no big deal. If I won, I'd either flip the briefcase itself or see what was inside and maybe make a few bucks from whatever was hidden within. I placed my bid and forgot about it for a few days. I didn't think much of it, figuring I would either win or lose and move on. But then, on the final day of the auction, I received an email notification: "Congratulations, you've won the auction." I was a bit surprised, but also curious. I paid the seller, arranged for pickup, and then sat back to wait. The day I picked up the briefcase, it was much heavier than I expected. I assumed it was just some old paperwork or documents inside, which didn't seem like much to me, but I was curious enough to open it in my car before even getting home. I popped the latch, and what I saw inside absolutely shocked me. It wasn't papers. It wasn't just junk. It was a collection of what appeared to be old military medals, certificates, and even a few photos of soldiers from World War II. I could barely believe what I was looking at. It was like some kind of historical treasure chest, untouched for decades. I started going through the items more carefully. There were several ornate medals, each with intricate designs. There were personal letters, some in faded ink, others in better condition. Most disturbingly, there was a small, locked box at the bottom of the briefcase. It looked like a jewelry box, and it had a strange, almost foreboding symbol on it. It was made of dark wood and had a keyhole, but there was no key to be found. My first thought was to sell the medals and letters. After all, they looked valuable and probably worth something to a collector or a museum. But that locked box, I had to know what was inside. It bugged me. I took the briefcase home and spent the next few days researching the items. The medals were from a variety of countries, all military-related. Some were rare, others less so, but there was no doubt that this collection was significant. I started to get in touch with a few collectors to get an appraisal. A few days later, I received a call from a serious buyer who seemed very interested. He mentioned that he'd heard of collections like this going for thousands of dollars. My heart started racing. I thought I had struck gold. But then, curiosity got the better of me. I decided I wasn't going to sell the items just yet. I wanted to find out about that locked box. So, I took it to a locksmith, hoping they could open it. The locksmith looked at it for a long time and said, "This isn't a normal lock. I can open it, but you should be prepared for what you find inside. Some things are better left unopened." I brushed off his warning as superstition. It was just an old box, right? I paid the locksmith and told him to open it. The moment the lock clicked, I felt a strange chill in the air. He opened the lid, and there, lying in the center, was a small leather-bound book, its cover cracked with age. It looked ancient. The locksmith didn't seem fazed by it, but I could tell he was a bit uncomfortable. "I don't know what's in there," he said. "But it might be worth more than everything else combined." I took the book from the box, feeling the weight of it in my hands. It was strange, old but not too old. Something about it felt off. I didn't know what it was, but there was something in the air around it that made my skin crawl. I figured I'd open it later, after I did a bit more research on the rest of the items. As I was cataloging the rest of the contents of the briefcase, something strange happened. I began to notice that certain parts of the medals and letters seemed familiar. The dates, the names, the locations, these weren't just random soldiers from World War II. No, they seemed eerily connected to some kind of secret military operation, one that I hadn't heard of before. The more I researched, the more bizarre and unsettling the whole situation became. Every link I followed just led me deeper into a rabbit hole of government secrecy and dark history. I opened the book that night. It was written in what appeared to be a mix of Old English and symbols I couldn't recognize. The pages were fragile, but I could make out enough to understand that this wasn't just a collection of notes or memoirs. This book described something terrible. It referred to an operation, one that had been classified for decades. The soldiers in the photos, the medals, the letters, they were all part of it. The symbols in the book were a warning. A warning about something that had happened in a small town in the 1940s, and something that still lingered there, waiting. I won't go into the details of what I found in the book. It's not something I want to remember, and I don't think I can describe it properly. But after reading it, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had stumbled upon something I wasn't supposed to. Something far bigger than a simple auction find. The story in that book painted a picture of an experiment gone horribly wrong. People had died. Secrets were kept. And it was all connected to that small town. I reached out to a few historians and experts, but none of them would give me a straight answer. They were all either too afraid or too reluctant to discuss it further. Some even told me to forget about it. And that's when I started receiving strange phone calls. People asking questions. Threatening messages. I knew I had to get rid of the items, everything, before it spiraled further. But it was too late. The book, the medals, the briefcase, they were all gone. I don't know what happened to them, but I haven't been able to sleep well since. It feels like something is watching me, waiting. I've sold almost everything else I found, but I'm keeping this story to myself now. I know I messed up, diving into something I didn't fully understand. But I don't think I'll ever truly be able to forget what I found. Some things are better left untouched. Some things are better left in the past. if you ever find a briefcase at an auction with a vague description, don't open it. Trust me, you'll regret it. TIFU by accidentally starting a fire in my apartment and having to get rescued by my neighbor, who's a firefighter. So, to start off, I'm generally not the type of person who does a lot of cooking. I'm the guy who orders takeout or microwave meals, but once in a while, I get this burst of motivation and decide to try something fancy, like a homemade meal. This time, I thought it would be a good idea to try making a simple dish, chicken stir-fry. You know, something easy and quick, right? How hard could it be? Well, apparently, it's hard enough for me to almost burn down my apartment and end up getting rescued by a guy I barely know. Now, I should clarify that I do have some cooking experience. I can make scrambled eggs without turning them into a burnt, sad heap of rubber. But when it comes to more advanced things like stir-fries, I'm a total novice. But I watched a YouTube video, got all the ingredients from the store, and was feeling pretty confident. I even set up my kitchen like I was some sort of professional chef, pan, spatula, ingredients laid out in neat little bowls, the works. The recipe said it would take 20 minutes, and of course, I thought, I can do this in my sleep. I started by heating some oil in the pan, and that's where things went wrong. I wasn't paying attention to the temperature, which was my first mistake. The recipe didn't specify the exact heat level, so I just cranked the burner to medium-high, figuring that's what most stir-fries need. That's when I started chopping the chicken. As I was cutting the chicken, I heard a faint sizzling noise coming from the pan, but I didn't think much of it. I was distracted by the sound of my kitchen timer beeping, reminding me to prep the vegetables. So I turned my back on the pan and began slicing the bell peppers and onions. A few minutes later, I noticed the smell. It was a bit smoky. I walked over to the pan and saw that the oil was shimmering in a way that didn't look right. By this point, the sizzling had turned into a full-on crackling noise, and I could see a bit of smoke rising from the pan. But I wasn't worried yet. I thought, it's probably fine. Maybe the oil is just really hot. Then, the smoke started to get thicker. At that point, I realized something was seriously wrong. I panicked and rushed to turn down the heat, but I didn't know if it was too late. I could already hear the faint sound of the oil in the pan starting to pop. The next thing I knew, a small flame shot up. Now, I don't know about you, but I've never actually seen fire in real life when it comes to cooking. Sure, I've seen it on cooking shows or in movies, but in my actual life? Never. And I definitely didn't expect it to happen in my own kitchen. My heart rate instantly spiked, and my mind went blank. I knew I had to put the fire out, but I had no idea what to do. I started scrambling around looking for a lid to cover the pan, but of course, I didn't have one that fit. Then, like a fool, I thought maybe I could just use a wet cloth to smother the flames. It turns out that's not a great idea with grease fires. Yes, I know now. Please don't remind me. The moment I touched the pan with the wet cloth, the fire exploded in size. Flames shot up, and at that point, I knew I was in way over my head. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, but my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone steady. The dispatcher was calm, asking me all the right questions, but I was panicking. She told me to get out of the apartment immediately and that firefighters were on their way. As soon as I hung up, I bolted for the door. But when I opened it, I ran directly into my neighbor, a guy I'd spoken to a couple of times but didn't know well. He was just standing there with his hand on the doorframe, looking at me with a mix of confusion and concern. "Hey man, what's going on?" he asked, clearly noticing the smoke billowing from my apartment. I think my kitchen's on fire." I stammered. Without a moment's hesitation, he said, "I'm a firefighter. I'm going in." Now, here's the thing, I didn't even know he was a firefighter. I mean, sure, I knew he worked in some capacity in public safety, but I had no idea he was literally the guy who runs into burning buildings for a living. So when he said that, I was both relieved and terrified at the same time. Relieved because he was about to save my sorry behind, and terrified because, well, I didn't know if the fire was going to be worse than it already was. He rushed past me into my apartment, and I stood there, feeling like a complete idiot. A few seconds later, I heard him shout from inside, "Get out of the way." He had gone into full firefighter mode and was already moving things around to try and deal with the fire. I took one last look at the mess of smoke and flames before bolting down the hallway. A few moments later, the sound of sirens grew louder, and a fire truck pulled up in front of the building. The entire place was filling up with smoke, and the firefighters immediately went to work, dragging hoses and setting up equipment. The fire was under control pretty quickly, and no one was hurt, thank God. The damage was mostly contained to my kitchen, but the smoke damage stretched all the way into the living room. The whole place smelled like burnt oil for days, and I had to throw away the frying pan because it was beyond saving. The fire department aired out the apartment, and thankfully, the building didn't suffer any major structural damage. After the firefighters had finished their work, I was left standing in the hallway with my neighbor. He was covered in soot, but he gave me a half smile and said, "Well, at least you don't have to worry about cooking for a while." I think I just stood there for a second, processing everything, before I muttered something like, "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen." He just shook his head, still smiling. "Don't worry about it. This kind of stuff happens all the time." I ended up buying him a couple of beers later that week as a thank you for saving my life and my apartment. But seriously, I'm never cooking again. I'm sticking to the microwave from now on. I'll leave the stir-fries to the pros. Lesson learned: if you don't know how to cook, don't pretend you do, especially when it involves oil and heat. Also, having a neighbor who's a firefighter is probably the only thing that saved me from losing everything. I can't believe I almost burned my entire apartment down over some chicken stir-fry. So yeah, TIFU by almost burning down my apartment and getting saved by my firefighter neighbor. TIFU by agreeing to dog sit for my boss and almost killing her poodle in the most ridiculous way imaginable. This happened last weekend, and I'm still trying to emotionally recover. For context, I, 29 work in a boutique marketing firm with about 15 people. It's the kind of place where everyone knows each other's birthdays, coffee orders, and pet names. My boss is Dana, 40 SF, is a terrifyingly put-together woman who runs on espresso, Pilates, and expensive skincare. She also has a tiny white poodle named Biscotti who she treats like a firstborn child and refers to in human terms. Biscotti has a wardrobe. Biscotti has an Instagram with 47K followers. Biscotti eats imported kibble. Last Thursday, Dana calls me into her office and says she's heading out of town for a wellness retreat and asks if I'd be willing to dog sit for the weekend. She frames it as a huge favor that would mean the world to her. I think this might be my chance to get in her good graces. She's hinted at promotions coming soon, so I enthusiastically say yes. Huge mistake. She drops Biscotti off Friday morning along with a 3-page printed care schedule, an entire tote bag of grooming supplies, dog food that needs to be microwaved for exactly 14 seconds, and a warning about how sensitive Biscotti's stomach is. She also includes a dog stroller. A stroller. For a dog. At first, everything seems manageable. Biscotti is prissy, but not difficult. I live alone in a modest apartment and figured it would be kind of fun. I take her on walks, avoid the food that's too spicy, her words, and even play her calming cello music at bedtime. Saturday evening is when it all goes to hell. My friend Jonah texts me around 7 p.m. and says a few people are coming over to his place for a casual hang, nothing wild, just drinks and Mario Kart. I figure I can swing by for a few hours. I pack Biscotti into the dog stroller, yes, I used it, and bring her along. She's surprisingly chill at Jonah's place, sitting on my lap and occasionally barking at the TV like a furry grandma. Someone jokingly gives her a lick of whipped cream from a can, and she goes absolutely feral for it. I remember Dana's note said, "No human food" in bold, so I sternly tell everyone not to feed her anything else. This is where the night veers off course. Around 10:30 p.m., Jonah suggests we go up to the roof. His building has a communal rooftop patio with some chairs and fairy lights, very vibey. I bring Biscotti up with us, still in the stroller. We hang out, drink, and talk under the stars. Everything is fine. Until I have to pee. I ask my buddy Matt to just keep an eye on her for a sec. I come back 2 minutes later to see Matt laughing hysterically and Biscotti loose, not in the stroller, but standing on the edge of a goddamn patio chair that's right next to the knee-high guardrail. This dog is trying to jump up on top of the rail like some kind of suicidal gymnast. I shout, startle her, and she slips. Time slows down. Biscotti does a horrifying little flip in the air and vanishes over the edge. Everyone goes silent. Then chaos. I run down 5 flights of stairs screaming "No, no, no, no" like an unhinged lunatic. I burst out the front door and expect to see Biscotti's tiny, lifeless body on the concrete. But she's not there. Turns out, by some miracle, she landed in a bush. A giant decorative bush in front of the building, which broke her fall. She's dazed, covered in leaves, but alive. Still standing. Still breathing. I scoop her up, shaking, and immediately call a 24-hour vet. I spend the next 4 hours in an animal hospital waiting room, sweating through my hoodie while Biscotti gets x-rayed and examined. Final diagnosis, minor bruising and a sprained leg. That's it. No internal bleeding. No broken bones. The vet literally says, she's lucky. This dog must have 9 lives. I get home at 4 a.m., carrying a bandaged Biscotti who is now mildly sedated and giving me judgmental side-eye in slow motion. I collapse on the couch, wondering if I should just quit my job, change my name, and move to Argentina. Sunday, I pamper this dog like she's Cleopatra. Microwave her food with surgical precision. Brush her fur every 2 hours. I even let her sleep on my pillow. I don't sleep. I just stare at the ceiling, imagining all the ways this could have ended with me being sued or arrested for poodle manslaughter. Monday morning, Dana shows up in her luxury SUV to pick her up. She's tan, glowing, sipping green juice. Biscotti runs to her like nothing happened. Dana smiles, thanks me profusely, says I'm an angel, and Biscotti looks so happy. Then she adds, she seems calmer than usual. Did you do anything different? I just smile and say, maybe she enjoyed the change of scenery. She hands me a Starbucks gift card and drives off. I go inside and collapse on the floor. I haven't told anyone at work the full story. I just nod and smile when coworkers say things like, I heard you're great with dogs, and Dana seems to really trust you now. But every time someone brings a dog into the office, I break out in a cold sweat. Never again. TIFU by letting my girlfriend's cat ruin my marriage proposal. So this happened about a month ago, and I'm only just now able to laugh about it enough to tell the story. I, 28M, had been dating my girlfriend Sarah, 27F, for almost 4 years. We live together, have a cozy apartment, no kids, but we do have her cat, Pickles. She adopted him when he was a kitten and he's now about 5 years old. Pickles is, how do I say this, the kind of cat who would burn your house down and walk away in slow motion without blinking. You know that one animal in every group of friends that's basically a sentient demon in a fur coat? That's Pickles. I always had a love-hate relationship with Pickles. He'd randomly attack my feet under the covers at 2 a.m., push glasses off the table while making eye contact, and has pissed in exactly one of my shoes every 6 months like clockwork. But Sarah loves him like he's her firstborn child, and he tolerates her like she's his annoying but necessary human. So I'd been planning this proposal for months. Sarah is the kind of person who doesn't like big public gestures. She's very private, hates attention, but loves meaningful stuff. So I decided to propose to her at home, during a quiet dinner, with candles and fairy lights and a little playlist I made of songs we've slow danced to in the kitchen. I even cooked her favorite meal, lasagna from scratch. I'm not even Italian. That's love. The ring? It was perfect. I spent weeks picking it out, custom-ordered, her birthstone surrounded by small diamonds. I kept it hidden in a sock in the back of my drawer. Every time I looked at it I imagined her face lighting up, maybe a few happy tears, some kissing, maybe more, you know. I was nervous but pumped. The night of the proposal arrives. I get everything ready. Candles? Check. Dinner in the oven? Check. Fairy lights strung up around the living room like some Pinterest board threw up? Check. Ring in my pocket, box polished. I even wore a shirt with a collar. Big night. Sarah comes home from work, surprised and clearly touched. She asks if it's our anniversary and I play it cool. We eat. We laugh. Everything is going according to plan. I start my little speech about how much she means to me, how these years have been the happiest of my life, how I can't imagine a future without her, and she starts tearing up. It's happening. It's working. I get down on one knee. Right as I open the box, Pickles launches onto the table out of nowhere like he's freaking Batman. In one sweeping motion, he knocks over a candle, dips his tail in the sauce, and lands in the middle of the lasagna dish. Sauce everywhere. He screeches like someone dropped a toaster in the bathtub. Panicked, he bolts, still covered in sauce, and tracks it across the living room, dragging cheese and noodles over the white rug. He skids into the wall, knocks over the speaker playing our romantic playlist, and disappears into the hallway leaving a red-orange trail like a cheesy murder scene. I'm frozen on one knee, holding the ring, lasagna-scented chaos surrounding me. Sarah stares, blinking, then covers her mouth like she's trying not to laugh. And then she starts laughing so hard she can't breathe. Like, crying and hiccuping and gasping for air kind of laughing. I try to salvage the moment. Will you still marry me? I ask, still kneeling in sauce. She manages a nod in between gasps. Oh my God. Yes. Yes. But holy shit, Pickles. Then Pickles, perhaps feeling he hadn't ruined enough, comes slinking back in, still with cheese stuck to his side, jumps up on the coffee table, and promptly throws up lasagna and cat hair in front of us like an unholy offering. We spent the next hour cleaning the rug, the walls, the cat, and each other. She said yes, and the ring was safe, thank God, but my shirt was ruined and I still find lasagna noodles in weird places. To this day, Sarah tells people he proposed during dinner. Pickles was very involved, and that's all she says. Everyone thinks it was something sweet and intentional. No one knows our proposal smelled like marinara and cat puke. We later found out that Pickles had gotten into some catnip earlier in the day. Sarah had left a new bag on the counter and he chewed through it. So he was basically high out of his mind when he went full Tasmanian devil on our big night. Great timing. Since then, Pickles has resumed his reign of low-grade terrorism in our home. He's already knocked the ring box off the dresser 3 times and peed in one of my socks in what I can only assume is a symbolic act. The wedding's in October. We're getting married in a small backyard ceremony. Pickles will not be invited. Hey, friends! If you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. TIFU by getting way too creative with my sick day excuse and accidentally launching a full-scale investigation at my office. So I work at a mid-sized marketing firm with about 120 employees. It's one of those modern cool culture places with beer Fridays, chill managers, and flexible work-from-home policies. But that said, there's still an unspoken expectation to show up unless you're basically on your deathbed or have a legit excuse. Last Friday, I woke up to a perfect storm, a hangover that felt like my skull had been hollowed out with a melon baller, a destroyed voice from screaming karaoke the night before, and the absolutely unshakable conviction that I would rather eat thumbtacks than attend work. so I decided to call in sick. Now here's where I went wrong. Instead of just saying I had the flu or food poisoning like a normal person, I had the bright idea to spice things up. I thought, why not be just weird enough that no one questions it? For some godforsaken reason, I typed out this message to my manager, Rachel: "Hey, I won't be in today. Something weird happened this morning. I found a raccoon in my kitchen, and in the chaos of trying to get it out, I fell down the stairs and twisted my ankle. Waiting on animal control and probably going to urgent care after. Sorry for the short notice." I hit send and immediately passed out again on my couch, feeling both pleased with my creativity and mildly proud of how unique my excuse was. That feeling lasted about 3 hours. I woke up to 17 missed calls. 2 were from Rachel, 5 from coworkers, 1 from HR, and the rest from unknown numbers. I also had a dozen Slack messages, and, oddly, a voicemail from a news reporter. Turns out, Rachel didn't find my excuse funny or weird, she found it alarming. Apparently, she'd mentioned it to the office in passing, and someone made a joke like, "What if the raccoon had rabies?" and that spiraled fast. A couple of people got concerned because I live alone and didn't answer any calls or texts for hours. So HR decided to be proactive and call animal control to do a welfare check on me. Animal control showed up at my apartment. I was still passed out, half-dressed, and 100% hungover. I didn't hear them knocking at first, so they started knocking louder. Then a neighbor thought it was a domestic disturbance and called the police. So now we have animal control at my door with a net in a box, 2 cops arriving 5 minutes later, my stoned neighbor from across the hall wandering out in a bathrobe to ask what's going on when I finally opened the door. I looked like a raccoon myself, eyes bloodshot, hair in chaos, ankle not even remotely twisted. The cops asked if I was the man with the animal, and I just stood there for a beat too long before saying, not anymore? That was the wrong answer. They wanted to search my apartment to confirm I hadn't been bitten or exposed to a rabid animal. One of them asked if I had any wounds. I said only emotional. Again, not helpful. Meanwhile, animal control was asking about the raccoon's last known whereabouts, and I was just trying to figure out if this was real life or the world's worst dream. I explained that the raccoon had escaped and was long gone, trying to sound convincing, but my story had more holes than a cheese grater. Eventually, they asked for a description of the raccoon. I said it looked like a raccoon. The woman from animal control wasn't amused. At this point, the police were starting to get skeptical, asking more direct questions about whether the whole thing was made up. I panicked and said, I didn't make it up, I just exaggerated the nature of the incident. When pressed further, I mumbled something about maybe the raccoon was more of a large squirrel in bad lighting. Finally, animal control left, visibly annoyed. The cops gave me a very polite but very firm warning about filing false reports, and one of them muttered something like, "Get some rest, man. You look like a raccoon yourself." Slam dunk. But the worst part? HR. Apparently, my raccoon lie, combined with the mini police/animal control raid at my apartment, triggered a mandatory HR meeting this Monday. I had to sit in a Zoom call with Rachel and a woman named Diane who clearly hates her job and all liars. I tried to explain it was all a joke that spiraled out of control. Diane didn't laugh once. Rachel didn't either, until Diane left the call, at which point she let out a huge sigh and said, "Please just say you have the flu next time. Or nothing. Say nothing." Oh, and the cherry on top? Word of my raccoon encounter had already circulated around the office like wildfire. I was now known as Rocket, as in Rocket Raccoon. Someone changed my Slack avatar to a raccoon with sunglasses and started adding trash can emojis to all my messages. One of the guys even made a Photoshop of me in a Rocket Raccoon costume standing in my kitchen looking terrified. It went semi-viral within the company. So yeah. I took a sick day. Just one. And now I'm the guy who got attacked by a hallucinated raccoon and caused a minor incident involving 2 government agencies. Moral of the story: if you're going to lie to your boss, keep it boring. Raccoons are not boring. TIFU: by accidentally exposing myself to my girlfriend's ultra-conservative family during a live Zoom prayer call. This happened last month, and I'm still trying to figure out if there's a way to erase myself from existence. So, a little context: my girlfriend Maya and I have been dating for about 2 years. We live together in a cozy apartment in a medium-sized city, both working remotely most of the time. Maya comes from a deeply religious, ultra-conservative Middle Eastern family. They're kind, generous people, but they're strict. Like, separate entrances for men and women at weddings, no alcohol, no dating before marriage, everyone dresses modestly type of strict. Maya's kind of the black sheep, keeping a lot of her lifestyle hidden from them. They still think she's living in a women-only apartment. That alone should have been enough for me to be on high alert whenever they're involved in anything. But no, your boy here got comfortable. One Sunday morning, Maya was invited to join her extended family for a special virtual prayer session organized by her uncle, who lives in Dubai. It was a big deal. Some spiritual leader was going to lead the whole thing, and nearly 60 family members were attending. Think of it like a religious TED Talk, but on Zoom and with more stern faces. Anyway, I had completely forgotten about this. It was the weekend, and I'd been gaming with my buddies the night before until like 3 a.m. I woke up around 11, groggy and extremely disoriented. I usually sleep in my boxers, sometimes less. That day, it was less. So, I wake up thirsty and stumble out of our bedroom toward the kitchen, naked, scratching myself like a confused caveman. I barely registered Maya sitting on the living room floor on a big prayer mat, laptop open on the coffee table, earbuds in, facing away from me. Now, here's where I make my fatal mistake. I didn't notice the HDMI cable running from her laptop to our 50-inch TV. Nor did I realize the TV was on, displaying the Zoom meeting in full gallery view. Basically, a giant religious mosaic of deeply conservative family members, all watching this prayer leader do his thing. You know how Zoom works: when someone speaks or moves, their square lights up. Guess whose pale, very naked body waddled into full frame behind Maya at just the right moment? Yeah. It wasn't until I heard Maya gasp and whip her head around like a horror movie jump scare that I realized something was very, very wrong. Her eyes went wide, then darted to the TV, then back to me, and she shouted, "Go! Go! Go!" I froze. Full deer in headlights. Then, in the worst decision I've made in recent memory, I panicked and ran in front of the camera to get back to our bedroom. That's right. Instead of backing away quietly and hoping no one noticed, I ran past the camera, closer to it, giving 60 conservative Muslims a full frontal shot of my ungodly self in high definition. I don't even know if the spiritual leader was mid-prayer. All I know is that by the time I reached the bedroom and slammed the door, I could hear the chaos erupting from her laptop. Multiple people shouting. Someone screamed "Astaghfirullah," which roughly translates to "I seek forgiveness from God" and is the Islamic version of "Oh my God no." I sat in the dark bedroom, curled under the covers, wishing I had a time machine or at least a cyanide pill. Maya came in like 5 minutes later looking like she'd aged 10 years. I muted the mic, but she paused. They saw everything. Everything. Her phone was blowing up. Texts from her mom, her aunts, her uncles, even cousins she hadn't talked to in years. Her dad apparently stood up mid-call and just walked out of frame and didn't return. Her mom was in tears, yelling about corrupted values and shame upon the family. Maya tried doing damage control, saying it was a neighbor who wandered in. Someone drunk. Maybe a break-in? That theory fell apart quickly because someone screen-capped the Zoom meeting. Yup. There's photographic evidence. Somewhere out there, in a WhatsApp group titled something like Family Prayer and Discussion, there is a blurry image of me looking like Gollum in motion, mid-sprint, with my bits out, featured prominently in the center of a gallery of elderly religious relatives. In the aftermath, things did not go well. Her parents now suspect she's living in sin. They demanded she return home for her soul's salvation. Maya is now half disowned. Her mother still talks to her, but her dad refuses to even say her name. The spiritual leader apparently gave an impromptu sermon afterward about resisting Satan's temptation in the modern world. Her 12-year-old cousin asked what that thing was. Maya and I had a long talk. She's hurt, and I don't blame her. I apologized 1,000 times. We're okay, surprisingly, but her relationship with her family may never recover. And every time we see the HDMI cable now, we both just get really quiet. So yeah. TIFU by flashing an entire conservative Muslim family mid-prayer session. If you need me, I'll be in a cave somewhere. TIFU by pretending I could cook to impress my girlfriend's family and almost burning their house down. So this happened a few months ago, but the psychological scars are still fresh. For context, I'm a 29-year-old guy who has somehow made it through life with zero culinary skill. My idea of cooking is heating up frozen pizza and, if I'm feeling fancy, adding some sriracha. I'm not proud of this, but I never really needed to cook. I work a demanding job, live alone, and DoorDash is dangerously convenient. Then I started dating Sophie. She's beautiful, hilarious, outdoorsy, and most crucially, the daughter of a family that basically treats home-cooked meals like religious ceremonies. Her mom is a chef. Her dad is a retired firefighter who built a pizza oven in their backyard for fun. Her 2 older brothers argue over the best way to sous vide duck breast. In other words, the culinary stakes are high. We'd been dating for about 4 months when Sophie invited me to a weekend at her parents' house. I was excited but nervous. I wanted to make a good impression. That's when I had the bright idea to tell her, very casually, like it was no big deal, that I loved cooking. "Oh really?" she said, visibly impressed. "You'll have to cook something for my family this weekend." Now, any rational person would have backtracked immediately. But I panicked and nodded like a psychopath. "Absolutely. I'll make my signature dish." Reader, I did not have a signature dish. Unless you count reheated Taco Bell. The week leading up to the trip, I scoured YouTube, Reddit, and food blogs for a recipe that looked impressive but doable. I settled on chicken marsala. It seemed manageable. Chicken, mushrooms, wine sauce, how hard could it be? The day came. Sophie and I drove out to her parents' gorgeous countryside home, where her entire family greeted us like we were returning from war. They were warm, friendly, and immediately started prepping ingredients for what looked like a Michelin-level dinner for a Friday night. I tried to play it cool, keeping my chicken marsala plan a secret until Saturday night. Saturday arrived. I woke up early to get a head start and immediately made 3 catastrophic mistakes. First, I realized I'd forgotten to bring marsala wine. No problem, I thought, I'll use the red wine they have. Second, I didn't know how to butterfly chicken breasts and ended up turning them into weirdly shaped meat chunks. Third, I used an entire bulb of garlic instead of a few cloves because I didn't realize the difference. Sophie's mom came into the kitchen as I was manhandling the garlic and asked if I needed help. I stupidly replied, "Nope, all under control." She gave me a weird look and left me to it. Now here's where the real disaster began. I had the chicken and mushrooms sort of cooking in the pan when I decided the sauce needed to thicken. I remembered reading that flour could help with that. But I didn't sift it or make a slurry, I just dumped half a cup of flour straight into the pan. The result was a lumpy, reddish paste that looked like regurgitated clay. I started to panic. The dish was going sideways fast, so I turned the heat all the way up to try to reduce it quickly. This, I later learned, is not how reduction works. The pan began to smoke. Not steam, smoke. Thick, black smoke that set off the fire alarm. I opened the window, but the smoke kept pouring out. Suddenly, Sophie's dad stormed into the kitchen like it was a 5-alarm emergency. Remember, he's a retired firefighter. "What the hell is going on in here?" he yelled as he turned off the stove and grabbed a towel to fan the alarm. Sophie and her brothers came running in. Everyone was coughing, eyes watering, and staring at the abomination in the skillet. It looked like chicken roadkill floating in hot tar. Her mom stepped in, turned the vent hood on high, and without saying a word, began cleaning the mess. I wanted to crawl into the sink and disappear. That's when Sophie, sweet Sophie, looked at me and said, "Babe, you don't know how to cook, do you?" And like a toddler caught with crayons on the wall, I just started apologizing. I admitted everything. The frozen pizzas, the DoorDash addiction, the last-minute YouTube education. Her family was silent for a few moments. Then her dad started laughing. Like, doubled over, tears in his eyes laughing. Her brothers joined in. Even her mom cracked a smile and said, "Well, at least you didn't burn the house down." We ended up ordering Thai food, and I spent the rest of the evening doing dishes and trying to redeem myself by helping in any way I could. But it didn't end there. The next morning, her dad brought out a fire extinguisher with a bow on it and said, "Just in case you ever try cooking again." Sophie later told me that the whole family actually appreciated the effort and found the whole thing kind of endearing. Still, the story of Chicken Marsala Inferno night is now part of their family lore. At every family dinner since, someone makes a joke about smoky chicken or asks if I've mastered flour yet. Good news is, I've since started taking real cooking classes. Last week, I made a decent risotto and only set off the smoke alarm once. Progress. But yeah. TIFU by pretending to be a chef and nearly causing a fire in my girlfriend's childhood home. TIFU by sending a poop knife to my girlfriend's ultra-conservative parents. So this happened about 2 weeks ago, and I'm only just now finding the courage to put it in writing. I, who 28M, have been dating my girlfriend, Lily, 26F, for about a year now. Things are serious. We've met each other's families, gone on vacations, talked about the future. She's smart, kind, and the first person I've ever truly felt I could be 100% myself around. Well, 99%. Because there's one little detail I've omitted. It's not that I was trying to hide it per se, it just never came up. That detail? I grew up in a house with a poop knife. If you don't know what a poop knife is, then congratulations, you had a normal upbringing. For the uninitiated, some people, through no fault of their own, produce poops so massive and dense that they don't flush. My family? Genetic overachievers in that department. So we had a designated kitchen-style knife, kept in the laundry room, thank you very much, that we used to chop up our girthy logs to avoid clogging the toilet. It was always just there. No one questioned it. You dropped a submarine? You grabbed the poop knife. Anyway, I moved out at 18, and after one tragic clogging incident in college that left me shamefully texting my roommate for a plunger while crying softly, I bought my own poop knife. Stainless steel blade. Dishwasher safe. I kept it under the sink, wrapped in a baggie, and never once had to explain it to a single soul, until now. Fast forward to 2 weeks ago. Lily was going to visit her parents for the weekend, and I was invited. They're very sweet people, but extremely conservative. Like, we don't talk about bodily functions in this house conservative. Their dog isn't allowed to lick its own, but in the living room kind of conservative. But I wanted to make a good impression, so I said yes. In the spirit of bonding, I decided to bring a little hostess gift. Lily mentioned her mom liked homemade jams and her dad liked quirky gadgets, so I sent a little care package ahead of my arrival. Inside was a jar of plum jam I made myself, a small bottle of local maple syrup, and, here's where I messed up, a poop knife. Now before you think I'm an idiot, you'd be right, let me explain. It was a novelty poop knife. Bright blue plastic, with the words "The Original Poop Knife" printed on the handle. I saw it online once and bought it as a gag gift for myself, then never opened it. In my mind, it was kitschy, silly, a harmless joke. I figured Lily's dad would open the box, laugh, and we'd all share a moment of crude camaraderie. Like, oh ho ho, that's gross but funny, thanks guy. Instead, I sent a poop knife to a man who made his daughter leave the dinner table once for saying fart. I had no idea the package arrived early. Lily's parents opened it without me there, as Lily was still en route and I was arriving the next day. Apparently, they laid everything out on the kitchen table, cooing over the jam and syrup, when her dad picked up the last item and went completely silent. He held it aloft like a murder weapon and asked her mom if she knew what it was. She didn't. They Googled it. Now, I'm not sure what corner of the internet they landed on, but apparently, they came to the conclusion that their daughter was dating some kind of deranged fecal fetishist. They didn't say anything to Lily directly, just grew increasingly cold and suspicious over the course of the weekend. She said grace at dinner and her dad interrupted her to ask if she'd prayed about her choice in men. Her mom accidentally referred to me as the sanitation engineer twice. Lily finally pulled me aside and asked if I had any idea what was going on. I admitted to sending the gift box, and when I described the contents, her face slowly twisted into a mask of horror. You sent them a poop knife, she whispered. Yeah. As a joke. To my parents? The silence was deafening. She went back into the house alone, and I was left sitting on the porch like a kid who just got benched at Little League. I thought maybe they'd warm up eventually, but oh no. When it was time for dessert, they said they'd already eaten. Later, I found out they threw away the jam and syrup just to be safe. The worst part came the next morning. I woke up to find Lily's dad had printed out several pages of information on coprophilia and left them on my pillow. Highlighted. Annotated. One section had a sticky note that said we don't accept this under our roof. Needless to say, I packed up early. The car ride back with Lily was quiet. She wasn't mad, just disappointed. Not in me, exactly, but in the universe for aligning events such that her boyfriend accidentally introduced her parents to the concept of toilet cutlery. We've mostly recovered since then. She can laugh about it now, kind of. But there are rules. I'm not allowed to send her family any packages, ever again. The poop knife now lives at the back of my closet in a box labeled "Do Not Open." And I will never, ever, attempt toilet humor with old-school Baptists again. So yeah. That's how I accidentally made Lily's parents think I was sexually attracted to human waste. And that, dear internet, is how I learned the importance of knowing your audience. TIFU by using a fake identity on a dating app and accidentally dating my boss's daughter. It started innocently. I was bored, a few beers in, and I decided to sign up for a dating app that I had sworn off a year prior. I had just gone through a breakup and, in a moment of insecurity and impulsiveness, created a fake profile. I used a picture of a guy I follow on Instagram. He's some aspiring model who I assumed didn't live anywhere near me. The photo was filtered, generic enough that it wouldn't immediately set off alarm bells, and I changed my name to Jake. I even made up a whole backstory. Jake, 29, freelance photographer, dog lover, into hiking, speaks 3 languages. It was my little experiment. Just for laughs, I told myself. See what the dating pool looks like from the other side. Within an hour, the matches started rolling in. It was addicting. Women were messaging first, complimenting Jake's eyes, his dog. I said he had a golden retriever named Biscuit, and his adventurous lifestyle. I played the part like a method actor. I kept the tone casual, flirty, and distant enough to avoid anything meaningful. It was all digital theater. Then I matched with E. She was clever. Her first message was a sarcastic jab about Jake's cliché profile. I responded in character, and we went back and forth for days. Unlike the other matches, E didn't fall head over heels for the picture. She seemed to enjoy the banter, the challenge. Our chats turned into voice messages. I kept it vague, said I had a sore throat to avoid actual phone calls, then into planned FaceTime sessions that I continually dodged with excuses. I should have stopped. But E was smart, funny, and weird in the best way. She had this running joke about trying to teach her cat Spanish and constantly made up fake horoscopes that she claimed she charged clients $12.99 for. I started logging on to talk to her before even checking my work emails. I realized I was genuinely looking forward to her messages. Then she asked if I wanted to meet up in person. I panicked. I tried to ghost, but she wasn't having it. She sent me a voice note, no pressure, she said, but she'd enjoyed talking and it'd be nice to get a coffee. Her voice was warm, kind. My stomach dropped. This wasn't a game anymore. I felt like the world's biggest asshole. I told myself I'd come clean. That I'd confess everything, apologize, and disappear. Instead, I said yes. I arrived 15 minutes early, hoping I could maybe find her first, apologize, and leave before it got more awkward. I chose a cafe near downtown that was quiet on weekdays. I was wearing my real face, obviously, so I figured the worst that could happen was a slap or a drink to the face. I deserved both. She walked in, and I recognized her instantly. E was Emma. Emma Wallace. As in, my boss's daughter. I'd seen her in framed photos in his office, heard stories about her trips abroad, her college graduation, the time she got caught sneaking into a concert. I knew she worked in marketing and lived nearby, but I hadn't seen her in person in at least 3 years. Not since the office Christmas party where she showed up late and spent most of the night glaring at her dad's executive assistant. She hadn't recognized me yet. She was scanning the cafe, looking for Jake. I froze. Half of me wanted to run, the other half was too stunned to move. Then she saw me. We locked eyes. She tilted her head in confusion. Jake, she said. I shook my head. No. And that's when she realized. Her eyes widened, and I saw the exact moment it clicked. Her face went pale, then red. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. I don't understand, she said. I apologized. I fumbled through an explanation that sounded like a poorly written monologue. I told her it started as a stupid joke, that I hadn't meant to hurt anyone, that I never expected to match with someone like her, and that I was sorry. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just stood there, lips tight, arms folded. After a long silence, she said, "My dad's gonna love this," and walked out. The fallout began the next day. I showed up to work thinking maybe, just maybe, she hadn't told him yet. Wishful thinking. The moment I stepped into the office, I knew something was off. People were staring. My coworker Josh gave me a pitying look and a slow shake of his head. Then came the meeting invite. Meeting with Mr. Wallace, 10:30 a.m. Mandatory. I walked into his office like a man walking to the gallows. Mr. Wallace didn't even look up when I entered. He just gestured to the chair. "I assume you know why you're here," he said. "Yes, sir." He sighed, closed his laptop, and finally looked at me. I expected rage. What I got was worse, disappointment. "She told me everything," he said. "I've worked with you for 5 years. I've trusted you. Promoted you. And now I find out you've been catfishing women online using someone else's photo, and one of those women just happened to be my daughter." I tried to explain again. That it was never about her specifically. That it was all a joke gone too far. That I regretted every part of it. He nodded slowly. "I believe you. That's the problem." Then he handed me a termination letter. Effective immediately. I packed up my desk in silence, under the watchful gaze of every other employee. No one said a word. Not even Josh. I left the building feeling like I'd just survived a car crash I caused with my own stupidity. Over the next few days, I went through the full spiral. Shame, anger at myself, regret, more shame. I deleted every dating app, every fake profile. I wrote Emma a long apology letter that I never sent. I thought about reaching out to the real guy whose photos I used, but what was I going to say? Sorry for hijacking your face for my emotional recklessness? The worst part isn't the lost job, or even the humiliation. It's that I really, genuinely liked her. And I'll never know what might have happened if I'd just been honest from the start. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. All I know is I'm never setting foot on a dating app again. TIFU by joining my girlfriend's family Zoom trivia night and accidentally destroying their family dynamic. So this happened a few weeks ago, and I'm just now crawling out of the emotional wreckage. I, 28M, have been dating my girlfriend Lucy, 26F, for almost a year. We met at a work function, hit it off immediately, and things have been going great. I haven't met her family in person yet because they live scattered all over the country, but every Sunday they have this family Zoom trivia night that she's told me about since the beginning. Last month, Lucy asked if I wanted to finally join in. I was a bit hesitant because she made it sound intense, but she reassured me it was low pressure, fun, and that her family would love me. I agreed. So here's the setup. Her dad is a retired professor who writes all the questions. Her mom keeps score. Her older brother, James, and younger sister, Sophie, are each on separate teams with their respective spouses. Lucy and I were a team. Now, Lucy warned me that her dad takes trivia very seriously. Like, he has a system for writing and categorizing questions, does PowerPoints, the whole deal. I'm pretty decent at trivia and figured, hey, sounds like a cute family tradition. I even brushed up on some classic trivia topics in the days before the call, US presidents, world capitals, Nobel prizes, just in case. The night arrives. Everyone's on camera. Her parents look friendly enough, her siblings seem chill. We do introductions and then get started. Round 1, General Knowledge. I answer a couple of questions correctly, and Lucy is beaming. Her dad seems impressed. Good vibes all around. Round 2, Family History. This was a surprise. Apparently, every trivia night includes a family-specific round, where the questions are about family vacations, relatives, childhood memories, and so on. Here's where I messed up. One of the questions was, what did Grandpa Dave famously do at the 1998 family reunion that we still tease him about to this day? Everyone laughed when it was asked, and Lucy turned to me and said, you guess. I had no idea. So I said the first vaguely humorous thing that came to mind, did he get drunk and hit on someone's wife? Dead silence. Then Lucy's mom goes, well, that's not funny. Her dad clears his throat and moves on quickly. Lucy's face is frozen in this awkward half-smile. I immediately whispered, I'm so sorry, I didn't know, and she just shook her head and said, it's fine, just forget it. The rest of the trivia night was more subdued. I tried to recover, got a few more questions right, made small jokes, but I could feel the tension. When we logged off, Lucy was quiet. I asked again what I'd done wrong. She finally told me that the reason it hit so hard was because Grandpa Dave did get drunk at that reunion, and he did hit on someone's wife, his nephew's wife, actually, and it caused a massive rift in the family. The only reason they tease him about it is because he passed away 2 years ago and everyone agreed to treat it as a funny memory instead of a shameful one. So yeah. My random guess hit a historical landmine dead on. I felt horrible. Lucy forgave me pretty quickly, but the next few days were awkward. She later told me that her mom messaged her after the call and asked, is he always like that? A week goes by. I figure, I'll just lay low and avoid causing any more issues. But no. It gets worse. Apparently, Lucy's dad was so bothered by my guess that he decided to clarify the family record in the group chat. He wrote this long post explaining the actual events of the 1998 reunion, rehashing all the details that had been politely buried for over 2 decades. This included naming the nephew, the wife involved, and details about Grandpa Dave's drinking that most of the younger cousins had never even heard. Cue chaos. The nephew, who had been quietly estranged but slowly rebuilding a relationship with the family, read it and promptly left the chat. His now ex-wife messaged Lucy's sister demanding to know why her name was being brought up. Lucy's cousin, the nephew's daughter, called Lucy in tears, angry that she had reopened the wound. And then Lucy's mom banned trivia night. That's right. After over a year of weekly trivia nights, through COVID, holidays, and 2 births, she pulled the plug. She said the family needed a break from competitive tension and uncontrolled disclosures. Lucy was furious at her dad. He, in turn, blamed me. He told Lucy that introducing someone who doesn't understand family culture is what triggered the whole thing. Lucy defended me, saying I had no idea and that he overreacted, which led to a huge father-daughter fight. Now Lucy hasn't spoken to her dad in 2 weeks. So, to summarize, I joined a family Zoom call, made one bad joke based on a total guess, and accidentally triggered a full-blown family crisis that ended a beloved tradition and reopened wounds from 1998. We're going to visit her parents in person next month, and I'm genuinely nervous. Lucy says it'll be fine, but I have been stress dreaming about Grandpa Dave every night since. In one of them he keeps making me do trivia while he drinks gin and points at a wedding ring. Moral of the story, when asked a question about someone else's family, just say I don't know. TIFU by accidentally starting a rumor that my boss was a drug kingpin and nearly getting him arrested. This happened about 4 months ago, and I still break into a cold sweat when I think about it. For context, I, 29M, work at a medium-sized software company in a nondescript office park in the Midwest. It's one of those places where everyone brings lunch in Tupperware, there's always someone heating up fish in the break room, and the most exciting part of the week is when the snack machine gets refilled. Our manager, let's call him Carl, is in his late 50s and is one of those quiet, mildly intimidating types who always wears a blazer even when it's 90 degrees. He keeps to himself, works late, and occasionally says cryptic stuff like there's always a plan B when projects go off the rails. So one Friday afternoon, we had a team happy hour after work at this dive bar nearby. Everyone was letting loose a bit, and somehow, the conversation turned to Carl and how none of us really knew much about him. No social media, no photos of family on his desk, no chit-chat. Just spreadsheets and that same brown leather briefcase he's had for years. Now, I've been told I can be a bit of a jokester when I've had a few drinks. So I, in all my IPA-fueled brilliance, said, you know what? I bet Carl's a drug kingpin. Think about it. The briefcase. The late nights. The way he always pays in cash when we do office pools. Probably laundering money through some fake shell companies. Everyone laughed. It was just a stupid joke. But I kept going, making up this whole fake backstory about Carl being known as El Carlista in certain circles, how his blazer was lined with diamonds, how the break room coffee machine was bugged by the DEA. I was really going off. It turned into this whole bit, and I didn't realize until later how far it would spiral. The next Monday, one of our interns, bless his soul, brought in a meme about it. It was Carl's head photoshopped onto Pablo Escobar's body from Narcos, and the caption said, "Me waiting for Jenkins to finish the Q2 report so I can ship 40 kilos to Miami." It was on the break room fridge. Carl saw it. Didn't laugh. Just took it down silently and walked back to his office. I felt bad, but I figured he either didn't get it or just didn't care. Oh, how wrong I was. Over the next few weeks, things got weirder. One of the admin assistants told me Carl had been pulled into a closed-door meeting with HR and legal. People started whispering about compliance investigations. I got paranoid that maybe someone took the joke too far, but I didn't want to confess to being the guy who started it. I thought it would blow over. Then, one morning, Carl didn't show up. Around 10 a.m., 3 guys in dark suits showed up instead. They had badges. Real ones. DEA and IRS criminal investigations. I nearly crapped myself. They asked to speak with several people, including me. Apparently, someone, still don't know who, sent an anonymous tip that our manager was laundering money through dummy software contracts and that there were large cash withdrawals tied to shell companies overseas. And get this, the tipster included the meme. Yes. The meme was included in the evidence packet. So now I'm in this glass conference room, sweating bullets, explaining to two federal agents that I made a dumb joke at a bar and that the whole El Carlista thing was a drunken improv sketch gone wrong. I had to sign a formal statement. So did 4 other people. The intern was terrified. Carl? He was furious. The agents eventually left after Carl showed them 10 years of immaculate tax records and client contracts. But Carl didn't come back to the office for a week. When he did, he held a mandatory team meeting and basically said, "I do not find baseless criminal accusations to be humorous. Let's get back to work." The silence was deafening. Ever since, Carl has been different. No more casual hallway chats, not that there were many. No more relaxed Friday wrap-ups. He still wears the blazer, still carries the briefcase, but now it feels like it contains a list of enemies. I'm pretty sure he knows I was the original source, even though I've never confessed. The kicker? HR made us take a mandatory office humor and professional boundaries training. With role-play scenarios. One of them included an eerily similar case where a joke about illegal activity escalated into a federal investigation. I had to keep a straight face while pretending to counsel a fake employee named Kevin who said his boss was smuggling meth in flash drives. So yeah, I nearly got my boss arrested, made my workplace a humor-free zone, and may or may not be partially responsible for Carl developing a mild twitch in his left eye. My coworkers still occasionally whisper El Carlista under their breath when he walks by. But they do it very quietly. TIFU by thinking I could impress my friends with a simple camping trip, and it ended in a disaster that will haunt me forever. It all started when I, being the self-proclaimed outdoorsman in my friend group, decided to plan a weekend camping trip in the wilderness. Now, I had never actually been camping outside of a few quick overnight trips to local parks. I had always managed to avoid anything serious, sticking to easily accessible campsites with nice, level ground, and bathroom facilities. But this time, I wanted to do something different. I wanted to take my friends into the wild and prove that I could handle the full, raw experience of nature. I convinced 3 of my closest friends, Brad, Chris, and Sarah, to join me. All of them had some experience with camping, but none were seasoned survivalists by any means. I knew I could handle the basic stuff. I'd watched a bunch of YouTube videos and read some articles on wilderness survival. What could go wrong? I picked a spot deep in the mountains, about 3 hours from the nearest town. The area was known for its untouched beauty, and, as I found out the hard way, its absolute lack of amenities. I had this grand vision of setting up camp next to a picturesque stream, cooking dinner over an open fire, and falling asleep under the stars. In my head, it was going to be an Instagram-worthy, bonding experience for us all. The kind of adventure we would talk about for years. So, we packed our bags, loaded up the car, and drove out. The weather was perfect, sunny, but not too hot. I was feeling confident and full of energy. Upon arrival, I realized that the hiking trail to our campsite was steeper and more difficult than I had anticipated, but I shrugged it off. We were young, fit, and could handle a little challenge. The hike was tough, but we made it to the campsite without too much issue. The moment we got there, I started unpacking with enthusiasm, explaining the finer details of setting up a tent, gathering firewood, and preparing our meal. My friends seemed impressed with how much I had planned. I felt good about myself. Too good. We managed to set up the tent, but it wasn't until we tried to gather firewood that things started to go downhill. As I was walking around the area, I realized that the forest was strangely quiet. No birds, no insects, just an eerie silence that I hadn't noticed when I was busy giving my expert camping advice. I shrugged it off, thinking it was just the time of day or maybe the altitude. After gathering enough wood, I went to start the fire. I had brought some lighter fluid just to make things easier, because hey, I wanted to make sure we got the fire going quickly. But as I fumbled with the matches, my lighter fluid bottle slipped from my hand and spilled all over the dry ground. I cursed, trying to salvage the situation, but it was too late. The dry leaves and twigs nearby ignited almost instantly, and within seconds, the fire had spread beyond what I had intended. Panic set in as I tried to stomp it out, but the fire was spreading too quickly. Chris and Brad rushed to help, grabbing their jackets and trying to smother the flames, but it wasn't enough. The fire was now threatening to spread to the nearby trees, and I realized I had no idea what to do next. I was the outdoorsman, and here I was, accidentally starting a forest fire. Sarah, who had been watching from the tent, finally screamed at us to run. We sprinted down the hill toward the trailhead, not knowing what else to do. In hindsight, I should have tried to call for help earlier, but I didn't. The fire was moving faster than we anticipated. By the time we reached the bottom, we were out of breath and covered in dirt. It was only then that I realized how bad things had gotten. The entire hillside was beginning to burn, and the smoke was thick enough that we couldn't even see the path anymore. We were stranded. To make matters worse, I didn't have a phone signal. The area was too remote, and none of us had a strong enough connection to call for help. We were completely alone, trapped by the fire that I had started. We spent the next few hours trying to find a way out. We walked around in circles, desperately looking for any sign of a road or civilization, but the smoke was so thick it was hard to see more than a few feet in front of us. The air was hot, and every breath felt like inhaling fire. By now, we were all terrified. My plan had gone from a fun camping trip to we might not make it out of here alive. Eventually, after hours of wandering, we found a small creek that ran through the woods. The water wasn't ideal for drinking, but it was all we had. We decided to follow it, hoping it might lead us to a road or a nearby cabin. It was now late afternoon, and we were all exhausted. My friends were starting to lose their patience with me, and rightly so. This was supposed to be a fun weekend, and instead, we were fighting for our lives in a forest fire. Just as we were about to give up hope, we heard the distant sound of a helicopter. It was faint, but it was enough to lift our spirits. We knew that the fire was big enough to have attracted the attention of emergency services. After what felt like an eternity, we finally stumbled upon a logging road. It wasn't much, but it was enough to get us to safety. We flagged down a passing truck, and the driver kindly took us to the nearest town, where we finally called for help. The fire was eventually contained by professional firefighters, but the damage was done. My expert camping trip had turned into a national news story. I had accidentally caused a wildfire, and it wasn't until weeks later that I found out just how bad the damage had been. The fire burned through hundreds of acres of forest, destroyed homes, and cost millions in damage. I felt like the world's biggest idiot. I learned a lot that day, mostly that I have no business pretending to be an expert when I'm not. I also learned that nature is much more unpredictable than I had given it credit for. A simple camping trip ended up being the most terrifying experience of my life, and I'll never be able to shake the guilt of what I caused. I ended up paying a hefty fine for my stupidity, and I've been banned from ever setting foot in that particular national forest again. TLDR, tried to impress my friends with a wilderness survival camping trip, accidentally started a forest fire that caused massive damage, and had to be rescued after wandering for hours. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.